The underground research facility trembled, its reinforced walls shuddering from the unexpected explosion. Alarms blared, their piercing wails cutting through the acrid smoke that billowed from shattered equipment and sparking consoles. Amidst the chaos, Dr. Elena Rodriguez remained unnervingly calm, her dark eyes fixed on the small metallic sphere clutched tightly in her hands. It wasn't just a prototype, it was humanity's future. Dust and debris settled around her, but Elena's mind was racing faster than the emergency response teams now flooding the chamber. Years of research, countless sleepless nights, and unrelenting determination had culminated in this moment. The sphere, no larger than a golf ball, represented a technological leap that would redefine humanity's place in the galactic community. "Status report," she called out, her voice cutting through the pandemonium. Marcus Chen, her youngest lead researcher, emerged from behind a fallen server rack. His normally pristine lab coat was torn and covered in gray dust, but his eyes blazed with an intensity that spoke of something between excitement and absolute conviction. "Primary quantum matrix is intact," he reported, pulling up a holographic display that danced with intricate, rapidly shifting patterns. The containment breach was strategic. Elena raised an eyebrow. With Marcus, nothing was ever truly accidental. The sphere in her hands pulsed with a soft, almost imperceptible blue light. To an untrained eye, it might have looked like a simple piece of technological jewelry. But this was a quantum-linked sensor node, the first of billions that would eventually form humanity's most sophisticated defense network. "Explain," Elena commanded, moving towards the backup command center. Marcus followed, his fingers already dancing across a portable interface. "The explosion was designed to test our fail-safe protocols. Watch." He pulled up a complex series of data streams that showed how the sensor network had responded to the sudden catastrophic event. Where any other system would have collapsed, this network had adapted, redistributed, and maintained its core functionality. The Global Orbital Defense Initiative was more than a project. It was a living, breathing technological organism. Outside the facility, the world continued its usual rhythm. Cities hummed with activity, unaware of the breakthrough happening beneath their feet. Political leaders who had repeatedly cut funding, military strategists who had dismissed their work, scientific peers who had mocked their approach. None of them understood the true potential of what Elena and her team had created. "They called us primitive," Elena murmured, more to herself than to Marcus. Her fingers traced the intricate surface of the sensor node, feeling the complex quantum entanglement that made it unique. Every species in the galactic community had focused on traditional defensive technologies, massive weapon platforms, energy shields, destructive capabilities. Humanity had chosen a different path. Information, prediction, adaptation. Marcus pulled up a holographic model of the developing sensor network. Billions of interconnected nodes, each capable of processing and sharing information at speeds that would make traditional computing look like an abacus. They weren't just collecting data. They were learning, evolving, predicting potential threats before they could even form. "The Carillion reconnaissance missions will be interesting," Marcus said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "They have no idea what's coming." Elena nodded. The first test was approaching. Their silent guardians were ready. The metallic sphere pulsed again, almost as if in agreement. The bridge of the Carillion reconnaissance vessel hummed with a familiar energy of impending conquest. Captain Krelax, a veteran of hundreds of planetary acquisitions, studied the holographic displays with practiced indifference. Earth appeared as just another blue-green dot among countless others. Another world waiting to be assessed, categorized, and ultimately integrated into the Carillion Confederacy. "Standard approach vector," he commanded, his four-fingered hand gesturing to the navigation officer. The creature, more machine than organic at this point, acknowledged with a series of clicks and precise movements. Junior sensor technician Frilna felt something was different. Her sensory tendrils, typically calm during reconnaissance missions, trembled with an inexplicable tension. Something about this planet felt wrong. Not dangerous, precisely. Just impossibly complex. "Captain," she ventured, her voice a low, melodic chirp, "our long-range scanners are encountering unusual interference." Krelax didn't even turn. Interference is standard for pre-industrial civilizations. Their primitive communication systems often create background noise. But Vrilna knew this was different. The interference wasn't random. It had a pattern, intricate, almost mathematical in its precision. Each time their scanners attempted to penetrate Earth's orbital space, the data would shift, reorganize, become something entirely unexpected. On Earth, in the underground research facility, Marcus Chen watched the Xarlian ship's approach with a predatory smile. The quantum sensor network was performing beautifully. Each of their billions of nodes was creating a dynamic, living shield that would appear completely invisible to traditional scanning technologies. "Look at this," he called to Elena, who was reviewing the latest system diagnostics. A holographic representation of the Xarlian ship rotated slowly, its scanning attempts represented by pulsing red waves that seemed to dissolve the moment they touched Earth's orbital space. Elena leaned closer. The beauty of their system wasn't just in its defensive capabilities, but in its ability to communicate, to send precisely calibrated signals that would make the Xarlian technology question its own perceptions. Back on the reconnaissance vessel, confusion began to spread. Navigation systems started reporting conflicting data. Sensor readings fluctuated wildly. What should have been a straightforward planetary assessment was becoming increasingly complex. "Recalibrating," muttered the ship's primary navigation officer, his mechanical appendages dancing across multiple interfaces. But each recalibration produced more nonsensical results. Vrilna's sensory tendrils were now fully extended, a sign of extreme alert among her species. "Captain," she said more urgently, "these aren't standard communication disruptions. It's like the space around the planet is alive." Krelax finally turned, his primary optical sensors focusing on the junior technician. Decades of military experience had taught him to dismiss such intuitive observations. And yet, something in her tone gave him pause. The quantum sensor network was doing more than just defending. It was communicating, in a language so sophisticated that the Xarlian technology couldn't even recognize it as communication. Each sensor node was a universe of information, connected through quantum entanglement, creating a network that was more than the sum of its parts. They weren't just detecting the approaching ship. They were studying it, understanding it, preparing a response that would be utterly unexpected. "Maintain approach vector," Krelax finally commanded, but there was a hesitation in his voice that had never been there before. Humanity's first line of defense wasn't a weapon. It was understanding. On Earth, Marcus turned to Elena with a look of pure scientific excitement. "First contact," he whispered, "is going to be very interesting." The simulation room buzzed with an electric tension. Marcus Chen stood before a massive holographic display, his fingers dancing across multiple quantum interfaces that seemed to ripple and shift with impossible complexity. His colleagues watched in a mixture of awe and barely contained skepticism. Dr. Aisha Patel, head of computational systems, leaned forward. "That can't be right," she muttered, her eyes tracking the impossible patterns emerging on the screen. Marcus didn't respond immediately. His wild hair stuck out at odd angles, a physical manifestation of the chaotic brilliance that defined his approach to technological problem-solving. What others saw as random, he perceived as an intricate dance of information and possibility. "It's not just about defense," he said finally, his voice soft but intense. "It's about communication on a level no one has ever attempted before." The holographic display showed multiple layers of quantum-entangled sensor nodes, each one capable of processing and transmitting information faster than the speed of light. But it was more than just speed. These nodes could predict, adapt, and respond in ways that defied traditional computational logic. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched from the back of the room, a slight smile playing on her lips. Marcus was about to do something unprecedented. transform a defensive network into a living, thinking entity that could manipulate information at the quantum level. The first test would change everything humanity understood about technological interaction. "Watch," Marcus said, switching to a new display that showed a complex simulation of potential alien communication protocols. Where traditional systems would see only noise, his quantum network began to find patterns, to understand, to predict. It wasn't just reading data, it was learning. The room fell silent as the simulation progressed. Lines of quantum information began to dance, reshape, communicate in ways that seemed almost organic. The Exarlian ship's communication systems, so advanced by galactic standards, began to look like primitive smoke signals compared to this network. "We're creating a language," Marcus explained, more to himself than to the others. "A way of communicating that doesn't rely on traditional transmission methods. It's pure information, pure potential." Dr. Patel's skepticism began to crack. How is this even possible? Marcus tapped a series of complex equations that appeared to float in the air. Quantum entanglement. Information transfer that isn't limited by physical constraints. We're not just sending messages. We're creating a living information ecosystem. Each sensor node was more than a piece of technology. It was a tiny universe of computational potential, connected to billions of others in a network so complex that it approached sentience. Outside the simulation room, the world continued its usual rhythm. Cities hummed, people went about their daily lives, completely unaware of the technological revolution happening within these walls. "The Exarlian ships won't even recognize this as communication," Marcus continued. "To them, it'll be like trying to understand a language spoken by the fabric of reality itself." Alina stepped forward, her eyes locked on the shifting holographic display. "Exactly," she said. "We're not building a weapon. We're building understanding." The simulation reached its crescendo. Billions of quantum nodes pulsed in perfect synchronization, creating patterns of information so complex, so nuanced, that they seemed to breathe with a life of their own. Marcus turned to his colleagues, his eyes blazing with the kind of scientific excitement that changes the course of history. "First contact," he whispered, "will never be the same." The quantum nodes continued their silent dance, waiting. The United Earth Command Center fell silent as Marcus Chen's presentation began. Holographic displays flickered to life, revealing layers of complexity that defied traditional understanding of defensive technologies. Admiral Helena Reyes, a veteran of diplomatic and strategic missions, leaned forward, her cybernetic eye, a testament to humanity's technological integration, scanned the data with rapid, precise movements. "Explain this again," she demanded, her voice sharp and controlled. Marcus took a deep breath. This was the moment everything they had worked for would be tested. "We're not destroying," he explained, his hands moving through holographic projections that seemed to breathe with living information. "We're communicating in a language they can't even comprehend." The displays showed the Exarlian ship's communication protocols breaking down in real time. It wasn't a traditional attack. No weapons were fired. No physical force was applied. Instead, the quantum sensor network was conducting a symphony of digital disruption, turning the invaders' most sophisticated technologies into cascading systems of confusion. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood beside Marcus, her presence a quiet source of confidence. The research team had spent years developing this approach, a method of defense that was more about understanding than confrontation. "Watch the navigation systems," Marcus pointed out. On the display, the Exarlian ship's guidance protocols began to produce increasingly nonsensical results. Routing algorithms twisted into impossible configurations. Communication channels became garbled, with information seeming to fold in on itself. Admiral Reyes raised an eyebrow. "This is our primary defense strategy." Elena stepped forward. "It's more than a defense. It's a form of communication so advanced that traditional military thinking can't comprehend it." The quantum sensor nodes were doing more than just disrupting. They were learning, adapting, creating a dynamic field of information that responded to each microscopic change in the approaching ship systems. Where traditional defense relied on destruction, humanity had developed something far more sophisticated. Each node is essentially a living intelligence, Marcus explained. They're not just collecting data. They're understanding it, predicting it, reshaping it. The room watched in stunned silence as the holographic displays showed the Tarlian technological systems slowly unraveling. Not through brute force, but through an incredibly nuanced manipulation of information itself. Dr. Aisha Patel, who had been quietly monitoring the data streams, spoke up. Their entire communication infrastructure is built on centralized control. Our network doesn't just break that. It fundamentally reimagines what communication can be. Marcus nodded. The quantum sensor network was turning the Tarlian ship's greatest strength, their hierarchical communication systems, into their most critical weakness. We're not attacking, he repeated. We're having a conversation they don't even realize is happening. Admiral Reyes studied the displays, her cybernetic eye calculating probabilities at speeds no human mind could match. Decades of military experience told her this was unlike anything she had ever seen. The quantum nodes continued their silent work. Each microscopic sensor was a universe of potential, connected through impossible quantum links that defied traditional understanding of information transfer. This changes everything, Elena whispered. The Tarlian ships continued their approach, completely unaware that they were already being understood in ways they could never comprehend. Humanity's first line of defense wasn't a weapon. It was pure, unfiltered understanding. The Exarlian fleet approached with the calculated precision of a species that had conquered hundreds of worlds. Captain Krelax watched his ship's primary systems with growing unease. Something was fundamentally wrong, but he couldn't identify exactly what. Recalibrate primary navigation, he commanded, his four-fingered hand pressing a series of complex controls. The ship's artificial intelligence responded, but the results continued to defy logic. Vrilna, the junior sensor technician, felt her sensory tendrils vibrate with an intensity that spoke of deep technological discomfort. "Captain," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "our systems are adapting in ways I cannot predict." It wasn't an attack. Not in any traditional sense. The quantum sensor network created by humanity was conducting a symphony of digital disruption that went far beyond simple interference. Each microscopic node was a universe of computational potential, communicating in a language so complex that the Exarlian technology couldn't even recognize it as communication. On Earth, Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched the unfolding scenario with a calm that belied the revolutionary nature of what was happening. Beside her, Marcus Chen's fingers danced across holographic interfaces, monitoring the intricate dance of information. "Look at how they're responding," Marcus muttered, more to himself than to Elena. Holographic displays showed the Tarlian ship systems twisting into increasingly complex and nonsensical configurations. Navigation algorithms began to produce routing patterns that defied standard computational logic. "We're not destroying," Elena observed. "We're teaching." Each quantum sensor node was doing more than just disrupting. They were learning, adapting, creating a dynamic field of information that responded to each microscopic change in the approaching ship systems. Where traditional defense relied on physical force, humanity had developed something far more sophisticated. On the Exarlian bridge, panic began to spread subtly. Their most advanced technologies were becoming unreliable. Communication channels garbled. Strategic algorithms produced results that made no sense. It was as if the very fabric of their technological understanding was being rewritten. "Diagnostic systems engage," announced the ship's primary artificial intelligence. But even its diagnostics seemed to fold in on themselves, creating loops of information that went nowhere and everywhere simultaneously. Marcus pulled up a complex visualization of the interaction. "We're not just blocking their communication," he explained to Elena. We're engaging in a form of technological dialogue so advanced they can't even recognize it as communication. The quantum sensor network was turning the Xarlian ship's greatest strength, their hierarchical and centralized communication systems, into their most critical weakness. Each node was a tiny universe of computational potential, connected through impossible quantum links that defied traditional understanding of information transfer. Vrilna's sensory tendrils now fully extended, a sign of extreme technological distress among her species. "Captain," she said again, "the space around this planet. It's alive." Krelax said nothing. For the first time in his long military career, he felt something close to fear. On Earth, Elena watched the displays with a mixture of scientific excitement and profound understanding. "First contact," she whispered to Marcus, "will never be the same." The quantum nodes continued their silent work. No weapons had been fired. No physical force had been applied. Humanity had discovered something far more powerful than destruction. They had found a way to communicate that transcended traditional understanding. The Xarlian ships continued their approach, completely unaware that they were already being understood in ways they could never comprehend. The diplomatic chamber aboard the United Earth Station gleamed with a subtle technological sophistication that spoke volumes about humanity's approach to first contact. Smooth surfaces shifted and changed, adaptive materials responding to the emotional and physical states of those present. The Xarlian diplomatic delegation entered with an air of confusion and barely contained frustration. Their lead representative, Ambassador Krulnash, moved with the precise movements of a species accustomed to absolute control. But something was different here. Something was fundamentally challenging everything they understood about technological interaction. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the center of the room, Marcus Chen beside her. They weren't dressed in military uniforms or traditional diplomatic attire. Instead, they wore simple, functional clothing that seemed to shimmer slightly. Another testament to humanity's technological integration. "We're not here to fight," Elena stated calmly, her voice carrying a quiet certainty that seemed to fill the entire chamber. "We're here to show you a different way of thinking." The Universal Translator, a marvel of quantum computational technology, worked overtime, capturing not just words, but the intricate layers of meaning behind them. Ambassador Krulnash's primary sensory organs pulsed with a mixture of anger and intellectual curiosity. "Your technological approach disrupted our most advanced reconnaissance mission," he began, his translated voice carrying a deep resonance. "This is a diplomatic breach of the highest order." Marcus stepped forward, a holographic display emerging from his wrist interface. "What you experienced wasn't an attack," he explained. "It was a conversation." The display showed the intricate dance of quantum sensor nodes, their complex interactions revealed in breathtaking detail. Where the Xarlian delegation expected to see a weapons system, they instead witnessed something far more complex, a living, breathing network of information that defied traditional understanding. "We analyze your communication protocols," Marcus continued, "not to destroy, but to understand." Each interaction was an attempt to communicate, to bridge a gap that traditional technological approaches could never cross. Elena nodded, her eyes meeting the ambassador's sensory organs directly. "Your technological systems are built on hierarchical control," she explained. "Ours are built on adaptive understanding. We didn't disrupt your systems. We engaged them in a dialogue you weren't prepared to hear." The Xarlian delegation exchanged complex biochemical signals, their version of a hushed conversation. Their entire understanding of technological interaction was being challenged. Vrilna, the junior sensor technician who had first noticed the anomalies during their approach, stood slightly behind the primary delegation. Her sensory tendrils were fully extended, a sign of extreme intellectual stimulation among her species. "You mean to tell us," Ambassador Krulnash said slowly, "that what we experienced was communication?" "More than communication," Marcus responded. "An invitation to understand each other in ways no species has attempted before." The holographic display continued to dance, showing how each quantum sensor node was more than just a piece of technology. It was a universe of potential, connected through impossible quantum links that defied traditional understanding of information transfer. "We're not interested in conquest," Alina said. "We're interested in understanding." The diplomatic chamber seemed to hold its breath. Centuries of galactic interaction had been defined by force, by technological might. Humanity was proposing something entirely different, a way of interaction based on pure, unfiltered understanding. Ambassador Krulnash's sensory organs pulsed with an emotion that translated closest to respect. "This changes everything," he said softly. And in that moment, everything did. The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with an energy unlike anything in its millennia-long history. Representatives from thousands of species crowded the massive circular auditorium, holographic displays flickering with unprecedented levels of activity. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the central podium, a lone human surrounded by centuries of established galactic diplomacy. Marcus Chen watched from the sidelines, his fingers tracing complex quantum patterns on a nearly invisible interface. "We're not presenting a weapon," Elena began, her voice clear and steady. "We're presenting a new way of understanding." The chamber fell silent. Centuries of galactic interaction had been defined by technological might, by the ability to project force and control. Humanity was proposing something entirely different. Ambassador Krulnash of the Sauralian Confederacy stood as a surprise witness. His presence alone spoke volumes. Where other species had expected a tale of human aggression, they would hear something far more revolutionary. "The quantum sensor network," Krulnash testified, "is not a defensive system in any traditional sense. It is a living communication matrix that challenges everything we understand about technological interaction." Holographic displays began to show the intricate dance of quantum nodes. What appeared to be random patterns revealed themselves as complex, adaptive information networks. Each node was a universe of potential, connected through impossible quantum links that defied traditional computational understanding. The Zornak representatives, a species known for their hyper-advanced computational technologies, leaned forward with unprecedented interest. Their crystalline communication structures had always been considered the pinnacle of technological sophistication. Now, they watched as humanity demonstrated something entirely new. Dr. Aisha Patel stepped forward, presenting a comprehensive analysis of the quantum sensor network. "This is not about defense," she explained. "This is about understanding. Our network doesn't just collect information. It learns. It adapts. It communicates in ways no previous technological system has ever achieved." The displays showed how the quantum nodes had interacted with the Sauralian ships, not destroying, but engaging in a form of communication so advanced it transcended traditional technological boundaries. Marcus Chen's interface began to project a live demonstration. Billions of quantum nodes danced in perfect synchronization, creating patterns of information so complex that they seemed to breathe with a life of their own. "Every other species has approached technology as a tool of control," Marcus explained. "We approach it as a method of understanding." The Galactic Council representatives began to request consultations. The implications were staggering. Humanity had not just developed a new technology. They had reimagined the very concept of technological interaction. Ambassador Hirin of the Crystalline Collective spoke next. "This challenges everything we know about communication, defense, and technological evolution." Vrilna, the Sauralian sensor technician who had first noticed the anomalies during their initial approach, stood as a surprise additional witness. Her testimony detailed the moment her species realized they were experiencing something beyond traditional technological interaction. "It was like the space around the planet was alive," she explained. "Not threatening, not aggressive, simply understanding." The holographic displays continued to show the quantum network's capabilities. Species that had spent millennia developing advanced technologies now found themselves looking at something completely unprecedented. Elena Rodriguez looked out over the chamber. Decades of research, countless sleepless nights, repeated dismissals. All had led to this moment. Humanity was no longer just another species in the galactic community. They had become something entirely new. "We're not here to conquer," she said softly. "We're here to communicate." The Galactic Council sat in stunned silence. Everything had changed. The research facility hummed with a different energy now. Where once it had been a place of isolated innovation, it had become a hub of galactic collaboration. Representatives from dozens of species worked alongside human researchers, their technological interfaces blending in ways that would have been impossible mere months ago. Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched the collaborative work with a sense of quiet satisfaction. The quantum sensor network had become more than a defensive technology. It had become a bridge between civilizations. Marcus Chen moved between workstations, his quantum interface projecting holographic displays that seemed to breathe with living information. The first joint research teams were discovering capabilities that no single species could have imagined alone. "It's not about who has the most advanced technology," Marcus explained to a group of young researchers from various species. "It's about how we can understand each other." The Exarlian researcher Vrilna worked closely with Dr. Aisha Patel, their different biological structures no longer a barrier to communication. Where once they would have been separated by technological and biological differences, now they spoke a language of pure information. Ambassador Krulnash visited the facility regularly, his presence a testament to the fundamental shift in galactic understanding. The Exarlian Confederacy, once known for its conquests, now became a key partner in exploring this new technological frontier. "We misunderstood communication for millennia," Krulnash observed to Elena during one of his visits. "We thought it was about transmission. You've shown us it's about understanding." The quantum sensor network had become something far more than its original design. Each node was now a living repository of interspecies knowledge, constantly learning, adapting, growing. The network that had once defended Earth now connected entire civilizations. Research teams discovered applications that went far beyond initial expectations. Medical technologies emerged that could translate biological information across species. Communication protocols developed that could bridge seemingly impossible linguistic and technological gaps. "Look at this," Dr. Patel called out, projecting a holographic display that showed complex information patterns. Researchers from the Crystalline Collective and the Zornak computational networks gathered around, their various sensory organs focused intently. The display showed how the quantum nodes could translate not just language, but intent. Cultural nuances that had once been impossible to communicate now flowed between species with remarkable clarity. Marcus approached Elena, his eyes bright with the excitement of discovery. "We're not just sharing information," he said. "We're creating a new way of understanding." Outside the facility, the world continued to change. Diplomatic missions that once would have taken years now happened in moments. Technological exchanges occurred at speeds that would have been unimaginable just months before. The sensor nodes continued their silent work. No longer just a defensive system, they had become something more. A living network of understanding that connected entire civilizations. Vrilna looked up from her workstation, her sensory tendrils vibrating with an emotion that translated closest to hope. "We're becoming something new," she said softly. Elena Rodriguez smiled. This was always the point, not to defend, not to conquer, but to understand. As the sun set outside the research facility, the quantum nodes pulsed softly, billions of interconnected points of potential, each one a universe of possibility. Watching, learning, growing. Humanity had discovered something far more powerful than any weapon. They had found a way to truly communicate.